Welcome back. Now that we have debuff type gameplay tags, our aura damage gameplay ability needs to know some parameters related to debuffs. So let's open public ability system abilities and get aura damage gameplay ability open. So we have damage and damage type. Let's make some parameters for debuffs now. Now, if you wanted this to scale by level, you'd make a scalable float, just like damage. In fact, all of the parameters we're about to make here could be scalable floats, and in a serious RPG, they probably would be. But that's going to create a lot more work for us to do, especially with something we already know how to do. So if you'd like to make these scalable floats and create a curve table and add curves for each of these, feel free, but I'm just going to make these floats that we can set on the gameplay ability itself, rather than go through all of the steps to make these scalable floats. So I'm going to have a float called debuff chance. And I'll give it a default value of 20. But we'll have to set that in the blueprint. So it's going to get a U property with edit defaults only, of course. But let's make the rest of our parameters. We're going to have a float called debuff damage. We'll set that to 5 by default. Now, debuff damage is what our debuffs are going to apply every so often while that debuff is active. In other words, we're going to apply debuff damage every debuff frequency. So we're going to have a float called debuff frequency. And by default, I'd like to apply that debuff damage every 1 second. Just making room for the U properties that we can place there. And the debuff will be active for a duration. So we're going to have a debuff duration as well. And the duration can be, let's say, 5 seconds. You can even make this a randomized duration and have a duration min and max. And those two could be curves. So this can get quite deep. But we're just going to have a debuff chance, a debuff damage, a debuff frequency, and a debuff duration. And these can all be overridden in the gameplay ability blueprint. So they're all going to be edit defaults only, category damage. And once we create a damage gameplay effect spec based on our damage effect class, we can set by color magnitudes for each of these, which means if we're going to set some set by color magnitudes for debuff chance, damage, frequency, and duration, then we need gameplay tags to identify those set by color magnitudes. So this brings us back to our gameplay tags, and these will be native, just like our debuff types. So let's go to Aura gameplay tags, and just under our debuff types, we're going to have more debuff tags. So we're going to have debuff.chance, debuff.damage, debuff.frequency, and debuff.duration. So let's make an F gameplay tag called debuff underscore chance. And I'm going to copy F gameplay tag debuff with the underscore, and we're going to have debuff damage. We're going to have debuff duration and debuff frequency. So in gameplay effects, you would call this the period, right? So now we have declared these gameplay tags. We need to actually create them. So we'll make those here. Let's find where we're creating the debuff tags. Just under debuffs, we'll keep it in the debuff section, but I'm going to have 4 more tags, and they're going to be debuff.chance, and the F name will be debuff.chance, and we'll just have debuff chance for the F string. In addition to that, we need debuff damage, and we're just going to replace burn with damage. We'll say debuff damage in the string. The next one is going to be debuff duration. Just performing the same steps here, debuff duration. And finally, we have debuff frequency. So there we go. We now have our debuff information tags. We could have called them debuff.info.chance and so on, but this is fine. We just need tags that we can identify these parameters by, because we plan on using these in our effect spec by setting gameplay effect parameters. So that's the next step for debuffs. Now, when we create a gameplay effect spec for damage, we're now going to be setting lots of set by color magnitudes. If we take a look at where we're doing it for Aura Projectile Spell, our one and only offensive spell, we see that we're assigning the tag set by color magnitude for the damage based on the damage type right here. Then later in the exec calc, we loop over damage types to get that damage set by color magnitude. And we're going to handle that in the next video, as this is something that could use a nice helper function to handle all of this for us. So we'll handle that next. I'll see you soon.